Hello everybody, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines and welcome back again to a shipwreck video. Today we're going to talk about the one-funneled liner, the SS Sussex. I hope I said her name correctly, but this is a quite interesting shipwreck, so with that out of the way guys, let's dive into her story. So of course we're going to first start with her building. Built in 1896 by William Denny and Brothers of Dumbarton for the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Company, Sussex was almost an exact replacement for the 1893 built Seaford, which sank in 1895 after a collision with another LBCSCR vessel, the cargo ship Lion. In the light of that sinking, an extra watertight bulkhead was incorporated. Sussex had a certified capacity of 750 passengers. So now come all the dimensions of those kind of things. So you know I'm not good with that pronunciation, but let's try. Sussex was 257.0 feet, 83.82 meters long, with a beam of 34.1 feet, 10.39 m depth, of a depth of 14.0 feet, 4.27 m, and a draft of 9.9 feet. As built, she measured 117 gross and 328 nRT. I'm sure I butchered that completely, but I hope you understood that. She was powered by two 4-cylinder triple expansion steam engines made by Denny & Co, totaling to give her the required service speed of 20 knots. Sussex was launched on 30 April 1896 by Viscountess Duncan, whose husband was a director and later chairman of LBSCR. The ferry undertook builder trials on 10 and 14 July, achieving 20.4 knots, and was delivered on 18 July. And now we move on to part 2, and that's her early life. Sussex served on the New Haven dive route, making her maiden voyage on 31 July 1896. In March 1912 she came to the assistance of the stricken P&O liner Oceana, which had been in a collision with the German ship, the steel barge Pisagua, and subsequently sank with a loss of 9 lives. Replaced by the Paris on the New Haven deep route in 1914, she was moved to Brington to offer a long day trip excursions, in competition with the wide funnel fleet paddle steamers of Bristol-based P&A Campbell. However, this proved unlucrative, and she was laid up from the end of that season. She was then sold in 1914 to the Compagnie des Semes. It's all French, so I'm not good with French, I'm not gonna try to pronounce it. But she would remain under the management of the LBSCR. Now we will move on to the third part of this story, and that's World War I and her incident, as I say it. During the First World War, shipping from New Haven was diverted to operate from Folkestone in order to free New Haven for supplying British troops on the Western Front. On 24 March 1916, Sussex was on a voyage from Folkestone to Dieppe when she was torpedoed by SM UB-29. The ship was severely damaged, with the entire bow forward of the bridge blown off. Some of the lifeboats were launched, but at least 2 of them capsized and many passengers were drowned. Now I actually have 2 survivor accounts of this story or this incident, and I found them in the book Into the Danger Zone, It's a book that talks about mainly the first shipwrecks of World War One, and the Sussex is also in it. So there are two survivor accounts that I would like to share. The first one was by the American passenger Edward H. Huxley. He was the president of the United States Rubber Export Company, and he made the following comments about the sinking. If Germany admits torpedoing a steamer near the position on March 24 in a channel, it will be their undoing, because the Sussex was the only vessel there. And at the time, if any vessel had been torpedoed 3 or 4 miles away, we would have heard the detonation and seen the craft attacked, for the day was clear and the sea calm. We remained on the after part of the Sussex, drifting for nearly 9 hours after she had been torpedoed, and had any vessel been in sight, she would have come to our assistance. It would have been impossible to mistake the Sussex for a man of war. She had a black hull with a white superstructure and buff-colored funnels. When the torpedo struck her, the Sussex was flying the French flag from her stern. I was sitting on the port side of the deck, a few feet on the after side of the bridge, when Francis E. Drake, our London manager, where there was a terrific explosion, apparently from the starboard side, which blew away the forward part of the steamer and killed or drowned all the passengers and crew on that side. The first lifeboat that was lowered capsized before it struck the water, and 20 out of 25 occupants were drowned. 5 other boats were lowered, which were all in a leaky condition, and made the remainder of the passengers and crew embarked in them, and they were lowered about 105 yards away from the hulk of the Sussex. After a little time, Captain Moffett ordered the boats to return to the remnant of the steamer, which was floating easily, the stern pointing up, and we were clambered on board again. We drifted miles with the current toward the French shore, before the French trawler came up at 11:13 p.m. in answer to the rockets which had been sent out by the crew of the Sussex to attract attention. A sailing ship came in sight at 5 o'clock, bound up channel, and we've hoisted our distress signals, but she did not alter her course. The traveller took off except 50 of the passengers and crew and proceeded to Boulogne. I remained on board the wreck with Mr. Drake until midnight, when we were rescued by the British torpedo boat, the destroyer Alfredi. The carpenter on the Sussex told me he heard Captain Moffett tell the commander of the torpedo boat destroyer that he saw the torpedo coming towards his vessel. On the way to Dover, a piece of the torpedo was shown by one of the officers of the destroyer, who had picked it up. It was made of some kind of bronze composition and was about the size of a man's hand. It had ragged edges and was curved as if it had been part of the cylinder. I went to the United States Embassy in London and made my deposition, and I was told that photographs of the Sussex and of the pieces of the torpedo with the statements of survivors were being sent to the State Department on the St. Paul. Another American passenger aboard the Sussex was the journalist Edward Marshall. He graphically described the attack in his affidavit. There's no doubt in my mind that the vessel was torpedoed. I myself did not see the approach of the weapon, but I heard one of the higher officers say to a British naval passenger that he had seen it, and the quartermaster who was on the bridge with the captain staffed to a friend of mine that the captain and others on the bridge saw the wake of the approaching torpedo and steered the ship so that it might, if possibly, escape. There seems to be obviously no support for the floating mine theory. Not long before the shock, we had passed floating wreckage, indicating the destruction of a vessel from the deck. This flotsam seemed to build tobacco, but that is mere guess. Concerning the identity of the shattered ship which bore it, I have been unable to learn anything. I was sitting in the smoking room when the shock came. I was very definitely jarred and was aware instantly that we had been blown up, but was not seriously shaken. At a table just aft of where I sat, a heavy man was thrown high into the air, coming down head first upon the chair on which he had been sitting, with force sufficient to break the chair. Of course, I hurried to the outer deck. The sun was shining brightly, the sea was very far from rough, but a strange uncanny sound was in the air, vibrant, chilling. It was a moan from the ship's company. I heard no screams. There was no mad panic. Women became hysterical and some men lost their heads, but there was amazingly little excitement. But there was something quite dreadful, which was the lack of training of the part of the crew. Captain Moffat was on a bridge. The vessel was probably struck just aft of the bow. Between a third and a quarter of the ship was cut off as it was a mighty knife. I reached the outer deck in time to see this severest portion of the vessel, before it slowly, uncertainly sunk. Still, there was no screams, but the ferocious moans of many people in slow pain grew louder. Women kept their heads amazingly. Miss Dorothy, with Phillips Hilton's daughter-in-law of the state Judge Halton of New York, came up to me. "I can't find my daughter," she exclaimed. I had seen her walking with a beautiful young girl about 22. I went with her about the deck to look for her, but we could not find her anywhere. The crowd about the boats had become dense immediately after the stunned pause which followed the explosion. From the very first I had no slightest thoughts of trying to get into a small boat, and so I was only interested and presently a horrified spectator. The captain was on the bridge. Probably the concussion somewhat stunned him for a few minutes, for the ship literally had been shattered away just forward of the bridge, so near to it in fact that the foremast had gone down. He was not in panic stricken, but like a man whose brain is dulled. Subordinate officers were very competent, but immediately were confronted by the utterly unmanlike crew. Some of them began to work at the lines about the davits from which the boat swung, but they worked incompetently. Passengers helped them. Still, there was no panic. One of the boats touched the water. There was a rush for it. Presently it was overloaded and without much difficulty was cast off and floated free of the vessel. It then seemed certain that the vessel would sink, and I called to someone in the boat to get a distance, thinking that otherwise the suction of the drowning vessel might take her down with her, but no one heard me. The crowd within the boat was not behaving well. Presently she capsized. I have no idea how many of her company were drowned. For a time they floated, struggling very briefly, for I am told the water was intensely cold. Then they began to perish one by one, a few being picked up by other boats which had been lowered and drawn near. In the meantime, gratings had been thrown overboard in large numbers. I saw only one person borne up sufficiently by one of these gratings. A strange thing occurred. A young woman deliberately disrobed and then plunged into the sea. At the other boats there was a succession of heartbreaking scenes. Some woman dropped their children into waiting arms and then jumped after them. Some men endeavored to slide down the ropes. A ticklish business, for the boat was rolling, and as often as not they presently hang between the small boats and the ship. This meant they must be crushed. I'm trying to reach or quote the pages, but if I'm saying something wrong, I'm sorry. But let's continue. 2 of the boats got cleared away, but came back to the Sussex when their inmates saw that she still floated, and that the small boats probably would not float long. Meanwhile, the Wireless had been re-engined, some of its stays having been carried away by the explosion. It crackled out its SOS. The sky grew overcast, and as sail approached, and rockets were sent up. The sail made the slightest sign that those who governed it had seen us. Later I learned that it was that of a windjammer, which had been helpless as the breeze blew to come to our assistance, but had picked up one of the boats. Disagreeable affairs developed. Some of the crew appeared with champagne bottles in their pockets and staggering. This did not become as serious as it might have been the cause, for the ship's officers took the liquor from them and cast it into the sea. I went among the wounded. The injuries were fractious. Both of one man's legs were twisted until his feet pointed backward. Another face had been blown in by the explosion and presented an extraordinary spectacle. He was unconscious. In the meantime, now and then, we went to the ship's rail, but could not see that the ship was settling. The sea was rising. I went below, having done all that I could, and having fallen once or twice upon the slippery deck, that in which I think I must have been the steerage of the ship. We huddled, shivering, some women sobbing, 1 or 2 definitely crazed, shrieking constantly, a few children crying, but now weakly, and moans coming from the slightly injured. At the end of the 53 crew and 325 passengers, at least 50 were killed, but the Sussex remained afloat. The Sussex was repaired in France post-war, and in 1920 was sold to Die Dimentraedes Prieraus, being renamed Hagia Sophia. She was scrapped in 1921 following damage sustained in a fire. And that was the end of the shipwreck of the SS Sussex. One thing I quickly wanted to say, I had to cut short the testimony of the second passenger, Edward Marshall, because otherwise the video was getting too long. So I hope you understand why he did that. But at the end, luckily he survived, otherwise he couldn't have given his testament. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it, and please leave in the comments what you thought of this video. I will leave a link to the book where I got these testimonies in the description. And for those who you don't know, we have an ocean liner Discord where we talk mainly, of course, about ships. So if you want to join, we are looking for new members. It will also be in the description. And also, again, thank you for all the new subscribers who have been subscribing. It really means a lot. And if you have friends from who like ocean liners or ships, please show them my channel. We're trying to reach the 300 subs. And with that whole speech out of the way, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. And have a good night or day wherever you are. And we will see each other on the next one. Goodbye.